everyone to this Monroe County Substance Use Disorder Community Awareness Commission, or SUDAC for short. Today is May the 19th, 2023. It's noon at the Monroe County Courthouse. So whether you're joining us in person or on Zoom, welcome. We're very glad that you're here. I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. And we'll open, as is our practice, by asking if there's any member announcements from the constituent groups that you're representing today. And if you're on Zoom, simply raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll go around the table here. None?
I guess my announcement would be that we still have a job opening for a community or a harm reduction community health specialist at the Monroe County Health Department. And that job is posted on the employment page of the county website.
Excellent. So if you want to get paid to do this work, there is a position open for you. Apply co.monroe.in.us. Any other items? All right, let's launch into our lunch and learn update. And Patricia Cummings from our prosecutors department. What updates do you have for us about the JLAP?
Basically, the people at the Mauer School of Law have been absolutely fantastic.
Can you make it green and then push the red?
All right. So the people at the Mauer School of Law have been absolutely fantastic about working with us. They've reserved the room. They, I think I had sent you the link, but they have already created the Zoom link for people to be able to attend. They'll do, just about everything. We'll need to do more advertising, but I mean, we've got plenty of time. Plus the Monroe County Bar Association seems to be, well, they know the JLAP people pretty well. So, and since we're going to gear this toward not only community members, but also practitioners, it looks like it's going to be a good thing. And so I'm just real pleased with it. I don't think we're serving lunch. That was one thing that they did ask me about. Well, setting up the food. And I'm like, this is not quite like a normal law school thing, because they want to lure the law students in with free pizzas and stuff. But we're not serving any food. People just have to kind of bring their own. So I think they're going to advertise it as a brown bag lunch sort of event.
Excellent. Any questions about our forthcoming lunch and learn on August 4th at noon?
So it sounds like it can be both in-person attendance and or by Zoom attendance. Is that correct?
Yes, people can appear by Zoom or they can appear in person. I don't know whether or not they'll be able to get CLE credits if they appear by Zoom. That's something that I'm still exploring, but JLAP people have said that, all that we have to do is, I think they've got some paperwork, and mostly we have to have a sign-in sheet for people who with their attorney number, and then that gets sent in to the commission that grants the CLEs.
Okay, is there a fee for their CEUs?
I don't think so.
Okay.
So far, nothing has ever been mentioned as far as fees. They just asked me whether or not we wanted CLEs.
Okay, thank you.
In terms of this body promoting the event, do you know when a registration link or other things will be available? Is it available now? Can we start promoting it, or what do we know about that?
I have no idea whether or not they require a registration. It's basically kind of an open thing. So I don't believe it has required a registration unless you want to get a better idea of how many people are going to do that. It's going to be in the moot courtroom, which seats hundreds of people. So, it would be great if we got hundreds of people, but I don't think we're going to overfill that room. Yeah,
that's a big room. So this body needs to, it sounds like, create some promotional materials and help get that out to folks. So that's something.
Do we have a title for it? That would help.
I think I've got it somewhere in my notes. Substance use disorders, how to recognize and refer clients, coworkers, or self for help.
There's an acronym somewhere in there.
Did you get all that?
I'll get it on the recording for sure.
Yeah. Okay, well, it sounds, I think what we can do is get something out to our email list and put it out on our Facebook page as well to try and drum up interest for this. Because I think while this is targeted towards those in the legal profession, it sounds like there's also going to be content for the general public as well.
Certainly, because we all know somebody who may have either a connection with the law or has had a brush with the law. And just knowing what sort of resources are out there, because, say if it's just somebody who simply has had a brush with the law, you can always go to your attorney and say, hey, does JLAP have any information that you can share with me on how to deal with my issues? And, it just makes everybody a better attorney, a better practitioner to be able to have those resources.
Sure. Well, this is going to be really helpful, I think. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none on Zoom, thank you for this, and we'll start promoting it. Next, we have Dr. John Baton here, who's going to talk to us about a dashboard that he's created using the data that we've looked at regarding substance use disorder deaths in Monroe County. John, the floor is yours. Or Dr. Baton.
Okay, John works.
John's fine. Okay.
Either or. Can you guys, everybody can hear me? Okay. I will share my screen. Here we go. Okay, so this information was originally provided to me in tabular form, so like in an Excel spreadsheet. What I did was map this data and essentially bring it into a dashboard, which allows for the visualization of information across space and time. And I think what this dashboard does is kind of signify a number of things and highlights a number of things. One of them that addiction is widespread across Monroe County, right? It's not isolated to specific locations. Two, it's also widespread among demographics, right? It's not isolated to just a specific age group or a specific gender. So how this dashboard works, I have a thing here. There, I'm just going to hide my Zoom panel. Okay. Oh, I hit the wrong one. There we go. How this works, this is basically an interactive and a dynamic data set. And so as you zoom into the map, the data numbers change. And so you can see here, as I zoom in towards, let's say, Ellettsville, for instance, the numbers are going to change with that. So you can see for this spatial extent of Ellettsville, we've had 12 deaths. These are the ages and genders of those deaths. You can also see by year. And so, for instance, in Ellettsville in 2018, there were three deaths in Ellettsville. Those are showing up the map here. I'm guessing there's 2 in one of these circles. For this kind of public facing interface, I've masked some of the data. So the original tabular information had addresses. And so that information has been masked from it. And I've also made this database for these points to basically disappear as you zoom in. And so as I zoom in, that point goes away. So you kind of get an idea of where this information is at a neighborhood scale, perhaps. I'm just going to zoom out here for a second again to show a little bit more. You can isolate this by just deaths in 2016, for instance, by clicking that, or 2019, my apologies. And this should work. Did I click it? There we go. And you can see that the map basically changes with these data as you're clicking on it. So you can see in 2019, we had 26 deaths in Monroe County. 14 of them were male, 12 were female, and this is the range of ages that occurred during that time period. Again, now if I zoom in on the map, that information is going to change as this is dynamic. We also can look at, and I'll be brief here, I'll just zoom out once more. This is the overdose deaths per year. Obviously, this chart is showing a pattern and a trend, I should say, right? That these deaths have been increasing, even though we've been seeing an increase in funding for treating of addiction and substance use disorder. We can also look at the percent of total deaths per year by clicking this. We can isolate again by year if we wanted to, and things of that nature. So this is the dashboard. That's the public facing one. And I mentioned earlier that there was an internal one that if the health department or somebody else is interested, I can share that. I do think that this dashboard would benefit tremendously with more data, especially going back in time. And so that's something that I'm kind of reaching out for right now to see if we can get data going back to 2010 or something like that, right? And also I would like to keep this dashboard updated for the future. So that's kind of it for me. I can show whatever you guys want if you guys have an interest in looking at anything, or I can also, I didn't point or click on any of the data either. So let me show one more thing here. I'll just zoom in. I live in beautiful Sherwood Oaks. And so I'm kind of zooming into my neighborhood. But if I click on one of these dots, you'll get information. And so you can see here on this dot, there's a total of 7 deaths that occurred in this general region. You get the gender, the age, and the cause of death. And we can sort through this 1, 2, as well as the year. One of the things that I was talking to Councilman Iverson about was basically filtering this data so we could actually see by what type of toxicity was the cause of death. The problem with this right now is that a lot of these are very kind of, there's a big kind of mixture of drugs involved. And so actually trying to figure out a way to categorize this would be very beneficial. So that's that. I've done a heat map of this as well. I'll show you one more thing and then I'll be done. I can talk at length. Here's one more thing. Here's the layers. I've only put a couple layers on here, but what we can do is turn off these overdose deaths and put on a buffer as well. And so this is essentially a same type of thing. This is a buffer of where these deaths occurred. This information does not have any qualitative information in it. It's just basically a representation of where these deaths occurred. So. Yeah, the way I have this set right now is that the data points basically disappear as you zoom in. And that is to both protect, this is a data transparency website, but I want to protect the victims here, right? And so I'll zoom in to this area and you can see it zooms out. So this was the 7 deaths, which occurred near the intersection of Henderson and Winslow. So adjacent to the, there's like a little shopping center there.
So,
So I'll say in the internal one as well, I do have what's called like a hotspot representation as well as clustering. So you can really start to kind of identify where are these areas.
that's kind of what I was looking at to see if like a bunch of them are closer to Crawford or a bunch of them are clustered here or clustered there. I was just trying to find out where they're all coming from. Do you know what I mean?
And this data too, when you're looking at it, there's a lot of deaths that occurred at the hospital, right? And so there's going to be a major hotspot at the old hospital as well as the new hospital. So.
And they find the person, and they get transported to the hospital. The place of death then is considered the hospital and not where they were transported from.
Yeah, that's correct. I'm trying to remember where the hospital is or was. Oh, it's right here. Yeah, so we have 37 here. You can see at the old hospital. New hospital, there's going to be, I should know this a little bit better. This guy? No. 16 at the new hospital.
So what is it?
Oh, I was just gonna ask if there was like the protective of like less than 5, if there would not be a dot that would show up, or like what other sorts of protective measures, like if you had like one person that was, in a particular region, would there still be a dot there, or is there a buffer of some sort?
Yep. And so I can just zoom out to, we'll go towards like Lake Lemon. I'm guessing there wasn't a lot of overdose deaths since this would be one individual here, a 53-year-old male. But with the cluster tolerance, it would say, there'd be a bigger circle essentially if there was 3 or 4, and depending on how many there were at that specific location, that cluster would be bigger. When you hover your mouse over it, it would say this cluster represents 3 points, or this cluster represents 16 points. So it just kind of depends on what the data. And these dashboards are as rich and as accurate as the data. And so that's just how it is.
John, how big is the buffer around the site? How big is the buffer?
In terms of the
Size.
radius.
The radius of the buffer?
Oh, sorry, the buffer. Yeah, for this one, I did a buffer of 0.25 miles, so a quarter mile buffer. And that is on this. And so these are quarter mile buffers. So it's essentially from that point, you have a 0.25.
0.25 mile?
Yep.
Okay, is there any way we could do it bigger and also do an age range instead of specific age if you click on the dot?
Sorry, I got the first part, Kathy. I'm having a really hard time hearing that.
I'm sorry. One thing I'm always worried about with dashboards is providing by not protecting families and making sure that they have some confidentiality. So what I'm thinking is maybe we could provide a bigger buffer than a 0.25 mile and also do an age range instead of a specific age for the dot. Thank you.
Those are things that are doable for sure. And this is very, something I'm very concerned about as well, is that confidentiality. And so I think, yeah, we could do a mile buffer if we want, you know, it just depends on how granular folks want to analyze this information.
And John, to Kathy's point, this is not public yet.
No, this is just internal. This is Monroe County only. So I do think that this would be very beneficial for the public to see though, and I'm all about public transparency. However, I'm just the GIS coordinator, so I'm not, I do not have the authority for a lot of these things. So
Yeah, speaking to Kathy's point, I think that some of them that are further out in the county where there is, just like one or two, having a buffer that's bigger than 0.25 miles would be really helpful, I think, or helpful in protecting folks' confidentiality and things like that. If you can do it like in, I don't know if there's 0.5 or something that would like capture multiple dots almost no matter what. Yeah.
It's in the county with the spacing of the residences. If you put an age and 0.25 mile, you can basically figure out who that is. So.
yeah,
When my parents had a farm, their lane was 0.25 miles long. Okay, just to give you an example. So,
yeah. I mean, I can do this at a number of different scales, and kind of see what you guys think when we get to one that's suitable. Yeah, and also with the buffer, like I said before, if we just have the buffer on without actually without the tab or the actual point data, you can zoom in and you can click on something, but you're not going to get any information for it. You're just going to get basically that there's a buffer there and that something happened in that general area.
Two questions. One, could you blur it even further? So I guess here's what kind of what I think I'm getting on what they're asking is it's like, from what I understood at one point, the data was to an address, right? Good. So you've removed that from the entire database. There's no way to access that.
Yeah.
Is there a way to blur it by neighborhood? Like, so like it doesn't even have these dots. Like I just worry about people looking at things like that.
Sure.
So like maybe, I mean, I don't really, when we're looking at places like that, I mean, at least from my point, I have no care of prevention because it doesn't work. So like, but when we're talking about how we can isolate places that have problems or that are areas, we all know by a general, if you were to give me a 5-block radius or 10-block radius, I could tell you where the problem is.
Sure.
If you live in Bloomington. If that's going out to the public, we should anonymize and blur as much as humanly possible should go out because we don't want people to, police highlight neighborhoods, whether they're good police or bad police. We don't know that, We also don't want other people to assume that neighborhood's bad and drive down the value. For instance, say if there's a stuff near 11th Street, people are just going to assume it's on the hill. If there's stuff near South Henderson, they're just going to assume it's at Crawford. If there's stuff near Shalom, they're going to have to. So if there's a way to blur it so those things aren't even a consideration, you'd probably be doing a lot of people a lot of justice. I'm sure I see you're working on it. I'm not trying to like jump down your throat here, but I just think that the idea of itemized stuff for anybody else than, I guess the police might need it or whatever. I think it's just really dangerous to put out there. We've seen what happens when people, even like that, I could figure that out. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like you're, what does it zoom into like a block radius or something? That'd be very easy to find out, Is there a way to do that?
Yeah. So this information could be aggregated by any type of area.
Okay.
So this could be by corporate boundaries. So just Bloomington, just Ellettsville, just Steinsville, and then Monroe County at large. It could also be done by neighborhood as well.
Yeah, I think just even, I know that like for you guys, especially, you need a little bit more itemized data. So like if the health department needed itemized data, that's one thing. I'm just talking about the pure public. For public consumption, it should never be done to that they can highlight a neighbor. We've just seen all across the nation what happens when that happens. People pick out,
Totally. And my thought with this too, having this mapped would be, so I'm a social scientist and I've got a long background of kind of looking at the ramifications of mapping social data, especially social data that has crime related to it or different demographic statistics. And I'm always hesitant to do such a thing.
Shows.
My thought here is that this could be useful for the deployment of like Narcan distribution centers where a lot of these clusters are. But again, that could be an internal facing thing rather than an external.
That's what I have that worry. Internal stuff, like for the health department, they know what they're doing. They know exactly where to go. That will help us at the SSP place things, even if we want the data, we can get it from them. But I just think it's really, Yeah, for public facing and be very to obscure it as much as possible.
Yep.
Yeah. I can tell you tried to already do it. That's the reason I asked. If I didn't think you were going to do it more, I wouldn't ask. I just figured that's what was going on.
Yeah.
Last question. 223 is how many deaths we've had since.
This is just up to 2022. So this is information that was retrieved from the coroner's office. Like I'd like to get, I would like to know how much, I would like for this to be an updated database that's basically updated regularly. Was the question, was this 2023 data?
What year does that represent, or does it represent a bunch of years?
This is representing 2020 to 2022. So it's just, 2018 to 2022.
So 4 years.
Yep. Oh, 5. Yeah.
And really 90% of that is in the last 2 years, right?
Yeah. You can look at the chart here and you can kind of see just like the immense kind of growth.
That's what I was trying to find. Okay, I just couldn't see it from far away.
And then you can isolate
Peter was
this.
blocking it for me on purpose.
Yeah. And then you can isolate this again if you wanted to just see, 2020 deaths, right? Peak pandemic, where those were occurring, as well as that range of gender as well as age.
I'll bet those deaths were actually higher. COVID blocked us a lot of knowledge of what's going on. People were, considered COVID deaths or other deaths. So I'll bet that those figures were probably just going to exponentially rise since it was so low during COVID.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You did a terrific job. It looks really great. So thank
Cool.
you.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Penny.
The thing Peter talked about toxicology, like that is paramount. Like if we could figure out, this place is got xylazine, for instance, like what we're doing with xylazine, we could target efforts there. Do you see what I'm saying? Like as soon as we have drug checking, and
Yep.
we'll be able to target places like that and be like, okay, we need extra help here. We need extra help there,
One of the challenges with this and what that it's doing is basically data categorization and classification. And if you have, 3 things like opioids, fentanyl, something else,
Methamphetamine.
it would be really easy to classify. But there's so many variables that we would have to get very coarse in terms of our grouping of these things into categories, right? And so that's something I need help with to do that, but that's totally doable and something I think would be very telling.
Is there any way we can help? Let us know. I mean,
Yeah.
We can help you get data there to make that, give us a better understanding of what we're dealing with. We all need a better understanding of what we're dealing with.
Yep.
So my interest in this as not being a subject matter expert in an SUD is telling the story. So for those of us who this is not a lived experience, these numbers are shocking.
Mhm.
Like these data are just absolutely mind blowing. And so the idea of telling this story in a compelling way to drive policy, to drive investment, to drive people to care is really key for me. And can you talk about what a story map is?
Sure. So anytime I deploy something like this, I feel like there's a needed contextualization of what's going on. And oftentimes that's done through what's called a story map. And so a story map allows you to integrate kind of narrative text, videos, audio clips, maps, other types of reports and things of that nature, which will really bolster a dashboard like this, right? This dashboard is great, but there's issues with this, right? These are actual people, right? And we're representing them as points, right? Which is a very kind of somber thing to consider, right? And I think a story map helps kind of personify or make these things more human. And so that's something that Peter and I have been talking about, is actually generating a story map for this. That would be kind of a landing page. And then we could have a map if we wanted. We could also just have these statistical charts, right? The map doesn't need to be included. We could just show like, hey, deaths in Monroe County related to substance use disorder are across the board, right? Across different, all demographics and things like that. So I can send on some links to story maps if you want. I've assigned students to make them in the past, and I've made plenty. They're nice ways for people to actually digest what's going on with spatial data.
John, could you pull one up just real quick?
Sure.
Maybe the racial covenants one or another one that you've got real handy, just briefly to showcase what that looks like.
Oh, yeah, the racial covenants one is really cool. Yeah.
Going to is it this one? Okay. This is a project I did at IU. It's still ongoing. This is the Reconstructing Bloomington project, but this basically tells information about the data. And so the point of this is to show people, A, what the data is, why it's there, why this is interesting, but also how to utilize the database and how to utilize the maps. And it also provides things that are, these are interactive maps already. And so, you know, having things like that embedded, but you can have videos in these things, and things of that nature. So that's kind of what a story map is like.
So you would do things like talk about the rise of fentanyl
Mhm.
and talk about other things that were going along simultaneously. Is that my
Yeah, and
is that
a
correct
great,
interpretation?
yep, an idea that Peter had that I think is really a great one is to actually have interviews with people who have experienced these things, right? And it's again telling you stories, right? I think a lot of people in Bloomington say, "Oh, substance abuse is at Seminary Square," you know, or something along that nature, right? But it's not. It's everywhere, right? Across class, across race, across age, and so having those types of stories, I think, could be really beneficial to the public as well as just powerful tools.
There's a group named NVHR who has moved like tons of policy by these. Like these are amazing. Like they really do move policy. This group we work with that works just with hepatitis C. Like that's 90% of what they do is they do these faces and voices and different stuff like that. And like literally they did a whole thing in Virginia that moved their policy by that. So it's man, I'd cuss right now, but it's powerful. It's good stuff. It's really smart. So we should do one here. That's amazing.
I know that after we had our first opioid summit and people received the Narcan, that there's a lawyer in town who tells about using the Narcan to save somebody. And it would be wonderful to have voices like that as well to show that harm reduction works.
I think those are more important right now. Like, I mean, I love to empower drug user voices and I think they're incredibly important. But I think that like, where we are, especially in Bloomington and some other places, the pushback we get is like almost at a precipice of pushing over. You know what I mean? And for the good is what I'm saying. Like, I believe that like we get people who use drugs of every shade of every color you can imagine, lawyers, police, anybody, people who use drugs, doesn't matter. If we can highlight that it's not just this guy in the middle of Seminary Square whose home was, you know what I mean? If we can give drug use a face that's like really different. There's a group that blurred the lines like that by having actors come in or like people dress up as different things and really look good for the day. And really they're homeless people living in an encampment. It changes people's minds of like, what is a drug user? You know, my daughter could be a drug user. Deserves just as much love as the person who's sitting there bumming change in the park, you know. But I think those things are incredibly powerful. And I think that the narrative needs to be stripped of what people think of when they think of substance use disorder. They think substance use disorder of negative connotations. That's one of the things we work with our nurses and stuff is like, you know, no one's going to hear that Johnny just started using dope again and go, all right, you know, and it's that kind of base narrative that you think of course they're not, because there's so much negative connotations with people who use drugs that we literally have to start to shift that public narrative around. And Bloomington's an easy place to do that. You know what I mean? I feel like we have a lot of forward movement to be able to do that.
So ways to reduce the stigma. A lot of things.
Reframe the entire, you know, the framework of what it is, you know, who we are as a people. Then people like, you know, a lot of us who are doing work here that don't, not me, but other people are doing recovery work here, other things that are doing this amazing amount of work. You know what I mean? People at the health department, all these people no one gets to see that are literally like working their asses off every day to do this work that don't have substance use disorder, that are fighting for people with substance use disorder. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, there's a story that gets told and there's a story that doesn't get told. We all see the bedraggled, beat down junkie getting better, right? That's great. It's powerful. It's good. We need positive stories about drug use, which doesn't have to be this campaign. You know what I mean? People who use drugs and don't go down, people who are microdosing, people who are smoking weed and that's part of their recovery, and people who are not getting brought up in public, who are making sure that people with substance use disorder are able to thrive and live. And that's a huge part of our puzzle that doesn't get talked about. It's also a policy moving piece, like you said, which is what we should be concentrating on at every turn. It's a huge part of what I'm trying to do in the next coming years, you know, is trying to get that narrative completely shifted because it's skewed and it's a false narrative.
So what I'd like to propose is that, Nick, if you're willing to work with John and share with him some of the work that you've seen around the Hep C campaigns, I think that might be a useful partnership to write these stories. And then feel free to loop in anybody here at this table if you need additional context.
Sure.
And I think we can get this going.
Yeah, sounds excellent.
Yeah, love it.
You could even do a thing with Larry, right?
Probably so, yes. And also just thank you for your work. I think this is a great tool, so. yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks.
I have one more question, sorry. It is the dashboard for the health department. Will that even show us trends across months so that we understand if there are seasonal issues that go on too?
This data, if I recall, so this data that I got had addresses. I took those addresses and converted them to a latitude, longitude. I think it was year. I don't think there was an actual date.
I think you're correct. However, I think if that's a good question for the coroner,
Mhm.
if we can we can drill down that data even further.
Yeah,
That's a really good point.
Yep.
Especially for that internal dashboard used by the health department or IRA. That would be useful to have.
yeah, I agree. The richer the data that I get, the better the dashboard is essentially what happens, right? So
There's also a point where we can share our data that we have that the health department has, but that like maybe there's something we miss or whatever that might help inform better.
sure, yeah,
There's also a lot to be said about like, we have, the state can only count certain things as far as reversals. We can count what lay people tell us reversals, which is a whole other story
sure.
that might be able to be shared along with this. That would be a huge, like, positive thing to show that here's all these deaths, and then all juxtaposed to that is here's all these people reviving themselves and you know what I mean, and saving each other in groups, and
Yeah,
all because of this project that we're doing, all of us, so.
yeah. With this too, just one last thing is depending on like how we do this, we could have a map of recovery as well or something, right? And you could click on a point and then that point could have a link to a story or an audio clip or a video or something like that, right? There's lots of like just really cool engagement things to do. So
Are there any questions for Dr. Baton on Zoom? Wanted to make sure that everyone on Zoom had an opportunity to ask questions. All right, seeing none, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. And I think, we'll continue to work together to fix some of the mapping issues, and then hopefully we can have a live product, whenever you feel like you're ready to go live with it.
yeah, I'll coordinate with the health department and other folks to make sure. Yeah, thanks for your time.
Thanks for your work.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is the power of GIS. That's really exciting about all the things that we can do to tell a story that we know about, but we can't necessarily get it out further. All right, so we've got a big agenda ahead of us, so let's get going here. The next item on our agenda is, let's see, let me catch my place up, is an update about IRACS, the Integrated Reentry and Correctional Support.
So I have been in touch with Jamie Whitaker, who is the kind of head of all that. And he's given me some slides that he did at a recent quarterly meeting of the Indiana Commission on Substance Use. I forget the title. Anyway, they are doing a second round of the pilot program that'll start July 1st. He said that we probably would not be ready to be eligible for that, but they are having a second one January 1st. And I would like for us to try to get ready for that. He's willing to come down with another person who we have to have a sort of a recovery group here in town that has to be in place first before they'll start to look at the IRACs. For those of you who don't know, this is a program that works with individuals who are incarcerated, where it is people with lived experience who go in and work with them and then follow them not only while they're incarcerated, but prepping them for release and then following them as they're out in the community. And so it's piloted right now in 5 counties. It was so successful after less than a year that they decided to keep expanding it. Eventually, they would like to have it in all 92 counties. There were 37 counties that have already put their hands up to be in the next pilot, however. And what Mr. Whitaker said is that he would like to meet with 3 groups, judicial, something like the broader community and then people involved with the corrections. Sort of. And so I'll try to keep everybody apprised of what's going on and also try to make this happen. So I'm hoping maybe within a month, we can get him down here for broad community stuff and the other things. He's willing to come down here to do it. Did you?
Did you mean lived experience, like with having to be in jail and having to go through the prison process? Or are you talking lived experiences like
The combination,
as what?
the combination.
Okay, great. Nice.
Yeah, and
We-
they were talking about how powerful this is. And yes.
She asks if we've heard the opposite before. Yeah, we've heard the adverse before of like people with substance use disorder, but no prison experience going in to help people. It's like, how can you help someone go back into society with all this stuff? I mean, trust me, no one helped me and it was like bizarre.
Yeah. And for the first 30 days out, 30 days after release, they had a 75% success rate in terms of not being re-incarcerated and things like that. They don't have longitudinal data because the program hasn't been in existence long enough, but they're very, very excited. And on May 31st, I think it's the sheriff from Dearborn County is going to come and speak at the commissioner's work session about it. May 31st. And so I think we were scheduling him for 11:30 that day.
That's fantastic.
They're coming for lunch and learn, they're coming to talk to
Now
us.
they're coming to talk to the commissioners. And so it'll be at our work session. It'll be 11:30 on Wednesday, May the 31st.
Can you come in person for that?
Yes, people can be in person and you can join us via Zoom, but we're scheduling it for specific times so that we don't keep them waiting.
Okay, one thing that you mentioned earlier is we have to have a recovery community for it. Can you explain what they told you about that and what they're looking for?
I don't know much more than what I said. I'm sorry, but the person who oversees that will come along with Mr. Whitaker when they come into the community. And so we'll get that figured out. But when I described to him the kinds of things that we already have in place with the Stride Center and this kind of group, and the fact that we're doing the lunch and learns, that we have the Indiana Recovery Alliance, the fact that we have other programs here in town, he thought we're at least on the road to being where we need to be. So he thought we probably could be eligible by January.
One thing to mention is Whitney is now a part-time peer recovery person through a grant that the Indiana Recovery Alliance got. So
She's actually full-time. She's full-time and she's not just peer recovery. I was gonna announce all of this, but
it's part-time tester, part-time.
Right,
peer
right.
recovery.
Thank you, sorry about that. Yeah, that was my announcement, by the way, but Whitney got hired on full-time finally. She's actually going
Congratulations.
back through ICADA again of her own choice to make sure that she gets re-educated. She did this of her own volition to go back through the training just to make sure it was relevant for her. She had done it 2 years ago and decided to go back and go again, which is braver than I am, just to make sure she had all up-to-date trainings and stuff. And so we're gonna send a couple other people there with her to go, so we can get a couple more peer recovery people. About our recovery community, I spoke with the SOTA about this, and this is maybe something we can talk about another time. We've been engaged for a while with some people to create a recovery cafe or a recovery, they call them recovery cafes or recovery hubs. What they are is they're basically 12-step based recovery, centered in a place where like a social cantina, so to speak. It's kind of like, think of New Leaf, New Life, but geared towards substance use and geared toward people who are in 12-step or recovery with MAT or stuff, having a place where they can go, collaborate, have meetings. That's the reason I want to do this. I want it to be a harm reduction friendly and harm reduction focused, right? But that if we do it the right way, it can be something like Thrive, which is like them and the drug using community are one. Like they don't differentiate. They're really inclusive. They're really nice. When something goes wrong with the drug user, the recovery community throws out to help them. Like, I mean, it's really, really neat. So I've been talking to Tony Toomer, who's a SOTA, he's the opioid treatment authority or senior opioid treatment authority guy. And he said, if you get a place to do it at, we'll give you the thing to do it, you know, or like the, whatever, the structure of what it is. It's a federal, like, you get federal money for it. I mean, it's like a huge thing. We don't want a bad actor to come in and do it like has happened in other places where like a recovery cafe comes in and they're horrible, really bad. Like there's a place I work on the HRSO street grant thing with Indiana State. And there's a person on there who literally like they're, thinking about filing some stuff on him. I mean, it's just, there can be some bad actors in the recovery community as well as in harm reduction, as well as anything. The idea, what I'm trying to say is when he's talking about the recovery community, usually that's what they mean. Is like an R Corp or a system oriented system.
Oriented system of care.
Thank you, that. And having a hub here for people who are 12-step have like a social meeting group. It can be harm reduction friendly, but like centered on their recovery and have be really focused on that aspect of recovery is really nice, and we need it. We need something that's like social, but also harm reduction accepting. You know what I mean?
Melanie, can you say that again?
Sure, the recovery oriented system of care. In fact, that was going to be a little bit of my update too with our CHIP groups.
Excellent. Thank you.
It's just those things are like vital that we make sure we do them before a group comes in and says, let's do them. There's really bad places that do them. Like say, I'm surprised that certain actors in town haven't created one yet. I think it's because they won't give it to them. But like, from what I understand, the Soda was happy to have us do it. They know us. They know who we are. They know what we do. I don't think I'd be over it. I think I just help create it. You know what I mean? And then find someone to run it because I shouldn't don't want to run it. I'm not running 2 organizations. Yeah, way too busy. But we could find someone and be really intentional about who we did. Have the board be people from here, other places. Really be intentional about what we're doing with our place and have a recovery place that's like open and ready for people to go into. There are a lot of people in recovery, especially early recovery, who have no place to just sit. You know what I mean? People who are homeless, who want to be in recovery, you could be there. You could learn trades. Like they farm out workers. Like, I mean, it's amazing the things you can do with that. Federal funding will cover most of it, so it's not a burden on the state. They don't go after local grants because they have huge funding. There's a board I sit on that would probably help us out. Like I've been just saying, that's something that would be such a huge boon for our community, to have like something that's dedicated just to that, but harm reduction facing,
Let's put that on future agendas so that we talk about it and we talk about, kind of what's going on. And then for IRACs, my thought is probably a monthly update on IRACs is a little much. And maybe if I put another update, maybe towards the end of summer, that might be appropriate. Or what do you think, Commissioner Githens?
Well, hopefully we'll have people down here before then and we can start to figure out what all the pieces are that we need to have in place.
Great. Okay, wonderful. That sounds like a really promising program. And yeah.
Well, and it fits in with the sequential intercept model that we
Yes, it
all have
does.
been talking about on so many levels. And so I'm pleased.
All right, let's move on our agenda. We are battling the clock here a little bit, but there's a lot of important things to talk about. Next, I want to kick it over to Mr. Steve Malone on Zoom to ask for an update on the CARES grant. Steve, you're unmuted, but can't hear you. Hold on 1 second, Steve. You're. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
There we go.
There's something wrong with the way
The-
your mic is picking things up.
Yeah,
I
the
think.
audio is garbled. We can't pick out individual words. Mhm. Yeah, take care of you. All right, Steve, what we're gonna do is we'll just move on to another agenda item and see if we can get the audio corrected. And if we can't, I'm sorry, it's really hard to understand you.
Steve, it may help if you leave the Zoom meeting and come back in. That usually resets the audio connection.
All right, thank you, TSD. We'll move down the agenda and then come back to Steve once he rejoins. Next, let's move on to the opioid settlement. And Commissioner Githens, what do we know about the opioid settlement here in Monroe County?
That we have to wait before we can announce anything. It's basically what we were told at the state level.
That's in terms of the matching grants from the states, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So it may be actually a couple of months before we can make a big announcement about what's going on.
Okay. But in terms of the broader opioid settlement, we have kind of the projection of funds there and we over the 18-year period and we.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the grant, right? Sorry, the grant application that we did. No, we haven't really spent any of the money out of that. And so we will be starting to, and actually Kathy and I were talking before the meeting started about some of the kinds of things that we'd like to see put into place with that money.
Great.
And I actually think that as we look to put together the 2024 summit, that some of that money could go toward a facilitator. I think that would be a reasonable use of that money.
I am very hopeful that that's the case. So if a member of the public has an idea about uses of the opioid settlement funds, they should get in touch with the commissioner's office, or what's the best way for a member of the public to express their interest in that?
No one has brought that up before, but I guess they could email the Board of Commissioners. Sure. And we'll start to put together a list.
Great.
I think we have some ideas from the work that we did to put together this grant application. So, yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's move on to SOFR, the Suicide and Overdose Vitality Review. Our coroner, Joni Stahlcup, was going to be here, but Kathy has graciously volunteered to give us some information about what's going on with SOFR.
Okay, we had our first meeting of the SOFR team, which is a suicide overdose fatality review team in April. It'll be a once a month meeting with everybody who's on the team who has some information that they can share about suicide or overdose in the community. The meetings are confidential and the information on the people can't be released to the public. The purpose of the meeting, though, is to review the deaths and see if there are gaps or system changes that need to be made or can be made to help prevent future deaths. So that is the whole goal of the program, and that is what the focus is on. Some of the recommendations that we discovered in the first number of deaths that we did is that we need to get people trained in next of kin interviews, and we have 2 people who have created applications for that and got them in. Packets for the coroner and our providers are necessary to give to families because some of the families needed other information to be able to cope. One thing that we noted, and this is something the state is working on, and we're happy to support them, is that methadone clinics do not have to report to inspect. And we think that should definitely be a requirement as well. So. And another one that we would like to do is get the county to implement a program that's called Handle with Care. And that is for children in the school system. So if something happens with a family member or a relative, that the teachers will be informed that that child has been through a trauma and that they can be extra alert to be able to help that child if needed. So
that program is called Hand Over Care.
Handle with Care.
Handle with Care.
Is there any questions?
Are those recommendations public?
Not at this point. I think at some point we will have them on a dashboard so that the public can see them, but not at this point yet. We just had our first meeting, so we're still getting things organized and ready.
Of course. Well, thank you. Next, Steve Malone has joined us again. Let's try this again. Steve, are you there? All right, we'll try back in a little bit here. Next, let's kick it over to Melanie for an update about CHIP.
Sure. So going off of what we were kind of talking about already with the ROSC model. So we're moving along. We're starting interviewing folks with our substance use and mental health chip that's focused on connections. So the process that we're doing is this systems map, basically trying to find barriers and challenges. I was actually doing an interview with somebody yesterday, and they were talking about the importance of having peers. They had their cellmate brought them. They're like, hey, man, we got to make some changes. And that was the first time that they were able to attend an AA meeting, because that was their methodology, but how impactful that and developing those support systems for people in early recovery. So we're getting some of the same information that y'all were just talking about. But if anybody in this room would like to be interviewed, might interview some other people just to get some of those barriers on the map. I also went to a training a train the trainer training. And we've got some live ones that are like the Tippecanoe County has already done this process. So I'll put a link in the notes, but it's also https://uwlafayette.org/TRRN. But if you Google Tippecanoe Resilience and Recovery Network on the United Way of Greater Lafayette page, they have an example of what one of these maps could look like, also broken out into the different systems. So maybe like the justice system, K through 12, just like substance use treatment and what a little bit more specific. So that is something that they have used to implement things like IRACs, these peer supports, recovery cafes, expungement clinics, and other things like that. So I think that it could be really impactful for our community in identifying some of the projects that we can use. That's my update.
You can interview all of us, Whitney and me, if you want.
I would love to.
Well, this is the second time that a recovery team has come up. So it definitely seems like that might be a direction this county might be headed in the future at some point. So it's really interesting. Thank you.
I do want to say, go ahead.
Just wanted to mention too, at some point, the recommendations that comes up from the SOFR team may be projects that we might want to do as a group. So just maybe keep alert on that. So.
Okay, excellent.
One thing I would say about those recovery cafes, like we very, I want to reiterate, like we need to be very careful with those, and we should definitely create a committee or a group that does it, of people involved in the stuff in our community, that before somebody else does it. Because you can open one here without anybody's, you can just open a recovery cafe, but let's just make sure we do it. People that are, thoughtful about it, we have a public thing about it.
Since Mel mentioned the train the trainer meeting, I thought it'd be appropriate to tell y'all, or we just organized a train the trainer meeting at the library June 28th. It's on a Wednesday, and it's going to be from 6 to 8.
And that's a train the trainer for what?
Naloxone.
Wonderful.
Would there be a chance that any of that could be recorded?
Yep.
So that that could be the kind of thing that could be used.
Absolutely. That's a great idea.
We'd ask one thing, if anybody knows how to do any recording, like
You can ask, if it's at the library especially, you can go in and ask CATS and they will actually help you do that. They will do it
That's
for
true.
you,
That is true.
and it's free. CATS, the Community Access Television, and they will do it for you.
That is why this organization exists.
Yes.
Making connections, making things happen. All right, Sudak, we're showing up. All right, Steve, are you there? Can we try this again?
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Oh my goodness, clear as day.
All right, good. Sorry, I'm in the hills of Brown County on the road. So I think I was going in a valley and I lost total connection. So I'm back.
Oh, Steve, what can you tell us about the CARES grant?
Just to let everybody know, we went through the scoring process this past week. Kathy was there with me. We have about $44,000 available to disperse between, I think, 10 to 12 grant applicants. In the process of getting the scores to our coordinator, Lisa Muser. Once she has that, then we will be getting with the commissioners, letting them know who we're going to fund and not fund, and the amounts, and then get that allocated sometime here within the next couple of months is our hope.
Questions, comments for Mr. Malone? there was a half of a
And
thought.
when do they announce the CARES grant? I can't remember.
It just depends on when we get the scores taken care of and we have the matrix done. So I'm hopeful. I asked that we get this done within the next month and a half. So I'm hopeful at least by then, if not sooner.
Cool. Thanks, Steve.
All right, well, we're gonna let you get back to driving there, drive safely and enjoy the scenery. It's beautiful.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, all right, great, thanks. All right, let's move on to National Recovery Month is coming up in September. How are we doing? Nope, okay, we're good, all right.
We have the grounds reserved, yes, and
Wonderful,
I'll double check and make sure that we have the courthouse lit up purple as well.
excellent.
We'll get chairs and tables. I still have my prize wheel and we'll try to get some other folks here. Well, yeah. Yeah. We do recovery questions and people come out and we give them beads and just have a good time.
We'll be there with my beads. Yes. We're bead hunting this year.
And it is fun. I brought my two kids last year and they loved it. It's quite the environment. It's really fun. They got all the beads and it's a great environment. So come out onto the courthouse lawn September the 8th and we're gonna have a good day. So thanks for the update. Glad that came together so effortlessly. All right, next, we are pushing forward with an educational summit. And I think the next step is going to be that Commissioner Githens and I need to get together and talk about making sure that the opioid settlement dollars are the right match for hiring someone to help us put this together. And does that sound like a good idea to you, Commissioner Githens?
It does. And I also had a conversation with Talisha Kopic at the convention center. She was able to recommend somebody who has put together other things like this. And she lives out in Ellettsville. And so I've been in touch with her and she's interested in trying to help organize this. So we have one possible person that we can consider to get this moving. So I hope that was appropriate.
No, that's great. And I've also been reaching out and talking to some folks about who would be good. And so we should have a nice pool of applicants to do this. So let's get together and talk about the funding and
I think we need to come up with a theme.
Harm reduction, harm reduction, harm reduction. Needles are your friend.
They also like connections. I mean, we've got a lot of really great partnerships that have developed over the past couple of years. And I think it would be a great opportunity to highlight some of those and the ways that people are working together to really improve the health of our community.
Yeah,
Yes,
I think,
partners.
I think a good.
How
thing
about
would be-
partners in harm
Yeah.
reduction?
I love that. And I want to make sure that we're broad. And so we're inviting everybody and including everybody.
Yeah.
So
I know this is a early in the game kind of statement, but I would like to advocate for somebody that has lived experience with drug use to maybe be a part of just keeping things centered on harm reduction and keeping our people in mind as we develop it. Does that make sense?
that is perfect. And
Perfect. What about you? Well, you can do it.
you raised your hand.
Yeah, I can get thrown under the bus. at the
Walked
same
into
time.
that one.
Yeah, I mean, but you could certainly have one person who's doing all the logistics and somebody else who keeps it on theme.
Yeah. Oh, good. I think she's been so with the planning of the summit. I think what Whitney means is in the planning of the summit. We're planning the summit. You'll be there. It's all, yeah. We'll all be planning something together. So there'll be voices plenty. Yeah.
Melanie, what was the title that Patricia just came up with?
Artisan harm reduction.
Partners.
Partners in harm reduction.
Partners in Harm Reduction. I love it. Is everyone else? Yeah, all right. It'll show up on next month's agenda. It's done. All right, good. And thank you for the focus on harm reduction and thank you for the reminder to be focused on people and not on things and processes and all that other stuff. All right. We are in the summer. The students are gone from Bloomington. And I just wanted to check in. It has historically been difficult to make quorum for this body in the summer months. Our next meeting is going to be June the 16th. That's a Friday at noon. Are y'all going to be here?
But I will not be here for the July meeting.
Okay.
I am not sure about June. That's Father's Day weekend, I believe, or
Okay.
if the Friday before it, so I don't know yet.
I will not be here for July meeting.
I'll be here.
All right. So I'm hearing June meeting is a
I'll be
yes. July meeting is a no. And that is Steve earlier. Oh, Dina's on them. Yeah.
What were those dates again, Peter? Just Steve.
June 16th would be the June meeting.
Okay,
July 21st, I believe.
I
And
should be
yeah,
able to be at both.
And July 21st is the July meeting.
Okay.
And I see that Dina is listening in just to make sure that the calendar that we meticulously put together is not being thrown asunder. All right, so we'll do our best to get 6 members for June. And I will be in touch with folks. I'll start counting heads for the July meeting, make sure that we can meet in July. All right, the last thing that we wanted to talk about was last month we did a jail tour. How did that go? Should we do it again? What were your key takeaways? Was it worthwhile? Was it not worthwhile? How do you feel?
The cookie was good. I mean, I'm glad we did it in a way. I saw the other side of the jail I've never seen. So it was kind of interesting. I just don't know what to make of some stuff sometimes with that because I never understand if I'm being conned or not. Because it's law enforcement. So I know that they have not conned, but like being pushed for their agenda. I know he needs a new place. I know that place is falling down or whatever. But when he said we can't do services because we don't have enough places or enough spaces to do services is just a lie. We don't need places or spaces to do services. We have all of that handled. I mean, he needs one small room to meet with to curate CV. He doesn't need any services. You know what I mean? So that part bothered me. Other than that, I like the sheriff kind of. I mean, that's hard not to like, I mean, he seems amicable and he seems like willing to at least have a discussion. He doesn't seem like he's against Arbor. So him from being like a bigger place is nice. He's not going to be focused on small time politics of like busting people who smoke weed or these small time things. It seems like to me that he's trying to look at broader strokes, Maybe, I don't know, but the jail sure was interesting on the other side. It was really bizarre. And yeah. But
I thought it was really beneficial and especially to see what they're dealing with upfront and the challenges. That was very educational and being able to make those connections so that we have a bigger understanding on how we can help and what we need to do. So
that's true. That was nice to at least make those like general connections with him and with the not just the sheriff, but the jail commander, who's freaking huge.
Well, and after we had the tour, Kathy and I sat and talked with them just for a few minutes about the IREX program, and they immediately started connecting with other people. That's why we have somebody coming in from Dearborn County to talk with us about the IREX program.
right, they identified, we told them the counties where the program already was, so they decided they knew which sheriffs and they were going to reach out to them to find out, to see if it would work for Monroe County, and it appears that it would, so. that's
Wonderful.
terrific.
Yeah, I think that those connections were really valuable. Also, just thinking about how much time we spend on Zoom right now, it's really nice to make a face or meet face to face instead of being just like through an email or something like that, to have that actual connection with the people that we're trying to talk to.
It's also the sheriff is letting them vape. That got me the best. He's letting people vape in the jail. Like that's, I mean, I'm sorry for you that don't smoke, but like to be able to vape, coming from smoking, to be able to vape in a jail situation. The other thing I would say, I'm gonna try and push to maybe see if IRA can provide some funds for people who can't afford it and want it, but like just the idea of a few things like that and the little chirper things they have there that they can talk face to face. Like I know it's a video, but like all of that stuff.
The chirp is a texting.
Right. And then you can also like do face-to-face visits on video Zoom. They have screens in there. Like they never had that when I was in jail. So, I mean.
And I guess just thinking about, those physical attributes, like what do those small, like how small the, like the medical service area was. I mean, all of those things, just like actually having a visual. I mean, you could see things from their presentation at the CJRC meeting a while ago, but just to actually like be in that space is a lot different than a photo.
It wasn't,
And actually just seeing the room and seeing that they only have one room that they can use for to have their meetings, that's huge because they're trying to get services in, but they only have one room where they can meet with people. So it's one group at a time for this piece of time because the other spaces are built, right?
I mean, I'm against incarceration of the sorts that they deal with anyway, so it's hard for me to say this in an objective way. I'm just being as objective as I can. I mean, to me, I think that the fact that we incarcerate people like we do is disgusting in the first place, and to worry about a place where we can have those services, considering they have that downstairs visitation room that they used to use for people to do interviews and for New Leaf New Life, so that like literally all they'd have to do is have my peer coordinator go down there and the tester test them in there in that visitation room, and that's it. We don't need a medical place. That's what I was kind of trying to say about that. Yeah, they're going to need more space because we've grown, but that sucks that they need more space. You know what I mean? Like we should be thinking not of a new building, but how can we incarcerate less people? You know, like that needs to be the focus, not, okay, how can we get them a new nice building? How can we incarcerate less people? How can we put less people in the system? If they need medical care, why are they in the system?
Well, and that's why it's good that a county council member and a county commissioner were there, because we are literally making decisions about talking to people about building a new facility that we need to have some of these elements in, not only the space, but also these broader considerations about how do we do a better job with diversion? How do we do a better job of a warm handoff after incarceration? All these things. So thank you to Commissioner Githens for attending. Thank you to me for not having a life so I could make it, you know, all those things. It seems to me like this is a positive thing. And I would like to do another tour maybe in the fall so that we have maybe some more answers about IRACs, more answers about the opioid settlement, more answers about how the summit's going to go and that sort of thing to kind of guide those conversations.
Maybe instead of a second tour, maybe what we need is just a meeting.
Sure.
I don't think much is going to change in a few months in terms of what the physical jail looks like, other than that they're cleaning it and painting it. But I think the meeting part of it was also very beneficial.
I honestly was fearful of going because it was just like, am I gonna have, you know, is my PTSD gonna like make me crazy, and like am I going to be able to handle like seeing folks behind a cage, you know, and some suffering. And after talking to Nick and hearing his experience, that I would definitely like to go if there was ever a next time. And I'm sorry I missed the first one. I'm also a felon, so you know, I have reasons for those feelings, I guess. But after hearing Nick's, it didn't seem so scary. So
There's also that adage of like, how can you fight? If we're fighting against something, we should always see what it looks like from the inside out. You know what I mean? Like, I'm really glad you guys went. I know you've probably been gone before, but I'm glad that you guys went. I'm glad Peter told me he made sure that I'd get out of there. So he promised me if something happened, he was going to get me out no matter.
And then I left early.
And then he left fucking early and I was stuck. But Penny and Kathy got me out.
Wow.
Right? Had they known that.
I mean, the bait and switch is a classic, right? Well, but in all seriousness, we want this to be a safe space. We want this to be a space where you can speak your truth, and we want any activities that we do to also have that in mind as well. So thank you for speaking out. Thank you for speaking out, and really appreciate that.
It was well done for any. I mean, I didn't feel one point like, I mean, I've been through 1,000 situations like that where I was on guard the entire time and it wasn't the vibe. Sucks because I saw like 8,000 people I know in there who now come and pray. I'll be like, now why was Nick walking in the jail and not locked up with us? But it was, it was worth doing. I mean, I think more people should tour a jail. I think everybody should have to see what it looks like when you incarcerate your people. You know, you should see what you're doing to somebody. What are you voting for? Okay, go look at it then, you know.
All right. Well, thank you for your reflections on the jail tour. We really appreciate that. Now, if you could take a look at the minutes that Melanie has meticulously worked on, spent a lot of time on these. Are there any changes to the supplied minutes? Everyone's name spelled correctly. The acronyms of the programs are all correct. Nick has no problems with Melanie's abilities. All right, hearing no changes, could we, all those in favor of adopting the minutes, please say aye. All those
Aye.
opposed? All right, the minutes are unanimously adopted. Our next meeting will be June 16th, right here in this room at noon.
No. You said it's in the conference room. On the agenda, it says in the county council conference room.
Oh, that's right. You're keeping me honest. It is in the county conference room. Yes.
Right there.
So it's on the same level as this room, but just in, and we'll have signs posted and everything. And I will, since it's the summer months, I'll be sending out lots of emails about making sure that you're going to be here and that sort of thing. So get ready for that. This meeting is adjourned. Go and have lunch. Thanks, Steve.